My name is Travis Holt, formerly of the U.S. Forest Service, Ranger Division, based out of Juneau for most of my adult life, stationed near Tongass, the largest temperate rainforest in the country. 6 years patrolling stretches of land so vast and quiet they seemed untouched by time. I used to joke that I knew the trees better than people, but in hindsight, maybe that wasn't a joke at all. There's a kind of peace in solitude that city dwellers never understand. Most people can't sit alone with their thoughts for more than 5 minutes without reaching for a screen. Out there in the wild, there are no distractions. Only your breathing, the sway of the canopy, and the distant chatter of wildlife that doesn't care whether you live or die. You learn to tune into things. Smells, shadows, tiny shifts in the wind. And once your ears adjust to that level of quiet, you never fully unhear it. After I left the Rangers, I tried living in Anchorage for a while, then Portland, then back up to Juneau. I kept telling myself I just needed time to readjust, that the traffic, the neighbors, the flickering hallway lights were all part of the compromise, but it never felt right. It was like trying to sleep in someone else's skin. I stopped answering calls, couldn't sit in restaurants, couldn't handle the sounds at night, the thrum of appliances, the hiss of radiators, the creak of unfamiliar floors. I knew they were ordinary sounds, but my body wouldn't stop reacting, like something in me had gone permanently alert. I started having these dreams, repetitive, small details changing each night. A cabin deep in the woods, a window without curtains, a figure outside. But the figure wasn't threatening. It just stood there, waiting. Each time I'd wake up, my heart pounding like I'd been running for miles, and no matter where I moved, the dreams followed. Always the same cabin. Always the same window. At first, I thought it was just withdrawal from nature, the body rebelling against re-entry. But then little things started happening. Lights flickering when no storm had passed. Footsteps above my ceiling in an apartment with no upstairs unit. My reflection would lag, just slightly, when I passed certain mirrors. I don't expect you to believe that. I wouldn't either. But it wasn't just me noticing. A friend came over once, just to check in. He left before sundown and later called me to ask why I'd let that tall man stand in the hallway during their visit. I hadn't let anyone in. I stopped talking about it. You do that eventually. You test the waters, people laugh, or look at you a little too long, like they're deciding whether to call someone. So I stopped, and I went quiet. Not just socially, but in the way prey goes quiet when it senses something watching. That's when I made the decision. I packed up everything I didn't hate and drove west. Left behind cell towers, fast food, the last traces of asphalt. No forwarding address, no service, no plan beyond surviving. Found a patch of forest land a few hours out from Sitka, accessible only by a boat and a 3-hour hike. Bought it cheap from a guy who barely looked me in the eye. The kind of man who signs papers without asking why you want to play so far from everything. I thought I'd found peace again. Built my own cabin, filtered my own water, chopped wood in the mornings and read until sundown. I relearned how to live without needing anything I couldn't carry. Some days, I didn't even check the calendar. Time stopped feeling like something you tracked. It just became something you passed through. I thought I had finally found what I had been looking for since leaving the Rangers. A life stripped to its bones. No lies, no lights, no noise. But the quiet out there isn't empty. That's what they don't tell you. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of things that don't want to be disturbed. The land doesn't care that you think you belong to it. You live at its mercy. And sometimes, something else lives there too. It started small. A sound I couldn't place, low, like a groan buried beneath the wind. Then a trail I didn't remember clearing leading further north. Then boot prints that weren't mine, large, deep, no sign of an approach, just appearing in the snow like something had dropped from the trees. I wrote it off. You have to, at first. The mind plays tricks. You chalk it up to fatigue, to loneliness, to the echoes of memories you never sorted through. But deep down, you feel the pressure build. You wake up with the sense that someone was just at the door. You find tools moved inches from where you left them. You start counting everything, just to be sure nothing's gone. The nights grew longer. The animals stopped coming near. I didn't hear the owls anymore. No tracks, no scat. Like something higher up the food chain had taken over, and everything else knew to stay away. I kept telling myself it was nothing, but the feeling never left. It was watching, and it didn't want me there. The real reason I left the cabin, the reason I packed up in the dead of night and didn't even wait for first light, it wasn't fear of being hurt. It was the realization that whatever it was, it knew me. It had waited. It had studied. And when I fled, I didn't feel relief. I felt followed. I told myself I was imagining it, even when I got back to town, even when I noticed the same marks in the dirt outside my apartment, even when I saw the outline of something tall, still, at the edge of the alley behind my building. I told myself I was tired, delusional, recovering. But some things don't stay in the woods, and whatever I found out there, or whatever found me, it didn't like being ignored. I knew what I was doing. Or at least, I thought I did. I'd been in the service long enough to know what isolation meant, what it required from a person. And maybe that's what attracted me to it all over again. That discipline, that ritual, the rules that kept your mind intact when the days blurred and the nights stretched their fingers across the sky. The cabin wasn't fancy, just a frame, really. I built it with my own hands, hammer, axe, saw, no concrete, no wires. Everything I brought in, I carried myself. The land was mine, legally, though it had the feel of something ancient, like it had already decided I wasn't welcome long before I laid the first board down. No roads led to it. You either came by foot, or you didn't come at all. It was 100 miles from the nearest utility pole. No service, no towers, just trees and sky and breath. The first few weeks were everything I had hoped. There's a kind of silence that settles into your bones out there. Not emptiness, just space, room to think, room to be. I tracked the deer, mapped the stars, started sleeping again. For the first time in years, I wasn't being watched, or so I believed. The snow came early that year. It fell like a curtain, soft and thick, wrapping everything in white and making the whole forest feel like a painting. My boots left the only tracks, my chimney the only smoke. I told myself that meant I was safe. I told myself there were no other eyes, that no one knew where I was. And for a while, I believed it. But then I started noticing things. Small things at first. Nothing I could point to, nothing that screamed wrong. Just impressions. I'd wake up in the middle of the night certain that something had shifted. The air would feel different, the silence heavier. My tools would be where I left them. But not quite. Just enough off that I began marking them with charcoal lines. Subtle. So subtle that if you were looking for proof, you'd miss it. But I wasn't looking for proof. I was looking for patterns. On the 13th morning, I found a smear of mud on the inside of my door frame. I hadn't gone anywhere the day before. The weather was too rough. No tracks in the snow, no sign of forced entry, just that smear. Like someone or something had paused before entering, or after leaving. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I brushed against it. Maybe it had been there longer. But I knew every inch of that place. It was muscle memory. I could navigate it blindfolded. That mark hadn't been there. And worse, it wasn't shaped like anything I could explain. Not a boot tread, not a paw print, just a long smear, almost as if something wet had leaned. I reinforced the door, moved my bed away from the window, stopped using candles at night. I wasn't afraid, not yet, but I was listening, and every instinct I had, every training module, every memory from my years in the field was starting to whisper the same thing. You are not alone. The next night, I heard it. A single knock. Just one. Not hurried, not angry. Just there, like punctuation in the dark. I froze. Every hair on my neck lifted. It wasn't the sound itself, it was how certain I was that it had never happened before. That the forest itself had gone still in anticipation. I waited, breath held, ears straining. Nothing followed, no footsteps, no voices, just silence, and the terrible, awful knowledge that someone or something had found me. I didn't sleep that night, sat in the corner with my back to the wall and my hunting knife on my lap, waiting, listening, remembering every horror story I'd ever laughed at, every tale dismissed around campfires. I wasn't laughing anymore, and I wasn't alone. But here's the part I still can't explain, not to myself, and certainly not to anyone else. I never opened that door. I never moved. I didn't even stand up. But the next morning, my firewood pile was gone. Every single piece. Not scattered, not broken, just gone. I thought I was alone out there. I was wrong. And the worst part is, whatever it was, it didn't want to hurt me. Not yet. It wanted me to know, to see, to understand, that it could come and go as it pleased, that it had been watching long before I ever built that cabin, that I wasn't the only one who had claimed that land. If you've ever considered going off-grid, you need to hear the rest. Because it doesn't end in the woods. It doesn't stay behind. What followed me, it waits, it studies, it learns. I'm sharing this because someone out there needs to understand. This isn't a story. This is a warning. Subscribe to MindFuel. Watch the next chapter. Because the knock came again, and the second time, it didn't wait for me to answer. From day one, there was something I couldn't quite name. A presence, maybe. A pressure. Like the woods themselves were paying attention. Not in a way that threatened me outright, but in a way that made it clear I was under review. Watched, not with malice, but with awareness. That kind of watching changes how you move, how you think, and whether you admit it or not, it changes how you sleep. The signs were easy to miss at first. Most people wouldn't have noticed. A squirrel pausing too long on a branch. A raven landing, then flying off again, like it had second thoughts. But when you've worked as long as I have in forests that span hundreds of miles, you come to know what normal is. And this wasn't it. I remember noticing the birds first. That was the shift that finally pierced through whatever calm I had wrapped myself in. They weren't gone. They were there, but quiet and still. They'd perch for hours without moving, as if frozen, as if waiting for something bigger than them to move first. Crows especially, normally loud, agitated, bickering over scraps or territory. Now, they stared, black eyes fixed on me like they recognized something in me I didn't yet know was there. I stopped hearing the rustle of rabbits through the brush, the scurry of mice beneath the floorboards. It was like the entire forest had paused, but not in mourning and not in rest. More like a breath being held, waiting for a sound, waiting for a signal. Even the wind felt different. It didn't whisper through the trees. It stalled, Hungarian, as if it too was listening. I tried to blame it on winter, on barometric shifts. I told myself the animals were burrowed deeper, but I knew the patterns of the land. the rhythm, and this silence didn't match it. This wasn't seasonal. This was submission. The kind of silence prey offers when something bigger steps into the clearing. By the end of the second week, I found myself adjusting my routines, not consciously at first, just moving faster at dusk, gathering wood earlier, locking the door. I told myself it was just the cold. But I wasn't cold. I was alert, hyper-aware, and I started walking the perimeter of the cabin every morning. Once clockwise, once counterclockwise. I don't know why. It wasn't something I planned or thought about. It just became necessary, like I was trying to convince something invisible that I was paying attention to. I started placing small markers, twigs stacked in threes, stones arranged in circles. I wasn't doing it to track anything. It was more like I was trying to prove I still had control, that if anything changed, I'd notice. But the strangest part? Nothing ever moved. Nothing disturbed them. And somehow, that made it worse. One night, I sat outside on the step. No fire, no lantern. Just the moonlight and the sound of nothing. That thick, unmoving nothing that seems to press in behind your ears. I don't remember how long I sat there. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. But I remember the moment I realized I wasn't alone. Not because I heard something, not because I saw anything move, but because the trees felt closer, heavier, like they were leaning in, trying to hear what I wouldn't say out loud. It wasn't peaceful anymore. That stillness, the one I had once craved, it had changed. It wasn't serenity. It was suppression, like something was keeping the forest quiet, not for its own sake, but for mine. Or maybe for its own. And then came the smell. I woke one morning and it was just there, hanging in the air, faint, metallic, wet, like copper mixed with rot. But when I stepped outside, the air was clean, crisp, no signs of decay. I walked 30 feet in every direction, nothing, no tracks, no blood, no animal torn up by wolves, just that lingering scent, like something had stood right where I was sleeping, close enough to leave behind breath. I tried to ignore it, pushed it aside, went back to chopping wood. Routine helps when you're trying to make sense of the unnatural. But it didn't last. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something press against the wall from the outside. Not a knock, not even a thud. Just pressure, like a hand slowly pushing against the wood, testing, measuring, remembering. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just waited, and eventually, it stopped. But even after it left, I could still feel it, like the memory of touch hadn't faded yet. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew what it meant. It wasn't trying to get in, not yet. It was letting me know it could. You can only rationalize for so long. You can only pretend you're in control until the thing watching you decides to act. I wasn't there for it. I was there for the silence. But the silence had already been claimed. And whatever had claimed it didn't want to share. If you think the forest is just trees and dirt, you're not listening closely enough. There are layers to that quiet. Things buried beneath it. Things older than names. That's why I'm telling this. Because some people go off-grid and never come back. And not all of them get lost. Some of them are taken. Or worse, some of them are followed. And when you finally hear that silence for what it really is, it's already too late. The snow had fallen steady the night before, thick, fresh, no wind to disturb it, just a clean white layer over everything, untouched. That kind of snowfall is honest. It records everything, every movement, every presence. It's a map of what's walked and what hasn't. That morning, I opened the door, same as always, checked the tree line, breathed in the cold. I don't know what I expected to see, but I know I didn't expect this. Footprints, human, barefoot. They weren't coming from the woods. They didn't cross the path. They didn't circle the cabin. They just started 5 feet from my door, facing it, like whoever made them had just appeared, out of thin air, no shoes, no tread, just bare, pale feet. Toes splayed, pressed deep into the snow like whoever or whatever stood there had all the time in the world. They stopped right at the door frame. No further, no signs of departure, no trail leading away, just gone. My first thought was a hiker, maybe someone lost, disoriented, but barefoot, this far out, with no tracks leading in. I checked the perimeter, every side. I made full rounds twice, nothing, not even animal prints. The snow was otherwise undisturbed, still perfect, untouched. It didn't make sense, still doesn't. But the longer I stared at those prints, the more a second realization started crawling up my spine. They were small, not child small, not quite, but narrow, long, fragile. The kind of feet that hadn't walked much, the kind that shouldn't be out in the cold at all, and the depth of them. They weren't fresh. The snow had hardened slightly at the edges, which meant they'd been there for hours, maybe longer, sitting, waiting for me to find them. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid of what I saw, but because of what I didn't. There was no sound, no knock, no trail. But I couldn't shake the idea that something had stood inches from my door and never needed to leave. You start to question yourself at that point, not because you don't believe what you're seeing, but because the explanation doesn't exist in any world you recognize. I took photos, measured the prints with my boot, documented everything like I was still back on assignment. But the more I did, the more useless it felt. Evidence of what? Of nothing? I stayed inside all day, didn't eat, didn't move much, just sat by the window and stared. The prints never melted, never distorted. They stayed exactly as they were, until the next snowfall buried them. And even then, I knew they were still beneath it. Still there, still waiting. That's when the questions started creeping in. How long had they been coming? Was this the first time? Or just the first time I'd seen them? And what kind of thing doesn't need to arrive or leave by foot, but still leaves a trail when it wants to be known? That night, I barricaded the door, reinforced the windows, loaded every round I had, but some part of me already knew. If it wanted to come in, it wouldn't knock again. If you're listening to this, thinking it's all coincidence, some strange weather, some wandering hermit, just wait. I wanted to believe that too, until I found the handprint, inside, above my bed. That's what's next, and once you see it, once you understand how it got there, you'll know this isn't a story you can forget. Subscribe to MindFuel. Don't just watch. Stay with me. There's more, much more. And if you've ever thought about leaving everything behind and disappearing into the woods, ask yourself one question first. What if something is already waiting there for you? There's a difference between being alone and being kept alone. I didn't understand that until the sounds began. At first, it was subtle. Just a rustle too close to the cabin, a crunch in the snow that didn't match my own footsteps. I told myself it was deer, elk, maybe the wind, but even the wind has a rhythm. What I heard didn't. The first clear sound came just after midnight. I was in bed, half asleep, drifting, when I heard it. A clicking, not mechanical, not sharp, more like something wet tapping against wood. Slow, deliberate. From the wall nearest my head. Click, click, click. I held my breath and listened. It would stop, then start again, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, like it was adjusting, timing itself to my heartbeat. It continued for over an hour. Then silence. I didn't sleep. The next night, I brought out my field recorder. It was old, but reliable. I set it by the window and let it run all night. I didn't expect much, but in the morning, when I played it back, there was whistling, not tuneful, not random, 5 long tones, then 3 shorts, then silence, then my voice. It spoke back in my voice. It was faint, distorted, but it was me, saying things I'd never said, words stitched together from past recordings, familiar, but wrong, like a mouth learning how to shape something it didn't understand. The cadence was off, like it didn't know where the emphasis should go, like it didn't know what the words meant, only that they were mine. I played it again, slower, louder. It ended the same way each time, my voice whispering from the trees. "Are you awake yet?" That was when the dreams changed. I started waking up out of breath, sometimes covered in sweat, sometimes with mud on my socks, once with pine needles in my sheets. But the worst was 3 nights later. I woke up and the front door was open, wide open, snow blowing in, my boots soaked, the cold biting through everything. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't unlatched it. And when I looked down, I saw the trail, just 3 barefoot prints, inside, leading to the kitchen. Then gone. I rushed to the tools. The axe I kept by the door, the one I checked every night before bed, was gone. It wasn't outside. It wasn't leaning on the porch. I found it 6 feet away from the woodpile, buried, blade down, in the snow, like it had been planted there, like it had been offered. I didn't bring it back in. I started keeping the recorder running during the day too, and in the background, always faint, always just under the wind, I kept hearing the same thing, the sound of someone walking, not pacing, not running, just walking, circling the cabin, always just beyond the tree line, never breaking it, like it was keeping time, like it was wearing a path I couldn't see, but it could never leave. And then there was the whispering. Not words, not language, just the shape of speech. Breaths molded into sound. From beneath the floor, from above the ceiling, from behind the window, always behind. Never in front. Never face to face. It was playing with me, testing, adapting. Something out there knew I was alone, and now it wanted me to know I wasn't. This wasn't a haunting. It wasn't wildlife. It wasn't madness. I've known all 3. This was something else. You might think I stayed because I had nowhere else to go, but it's more honest to say I stayed because I was afraid of what would follow if I left. I've seen a lot in my time. I've been a ranger, a rescuer, a witness to both human cruelty and natural violence. But I have never felt anything watch me with this kind of hunger. And if it could speak in my voice, what else could it learn? There are things in this world we stopped naming a long time ago, but they're still here, waiting, listening, copying. Don't miss what's next. Subscribe to MindFuel. Stay alert. Stay aware, because once it speaks like you. I wasn't sleeping anymore. Not really. Not with the door opening on its own, not with my voice echoing back at me from the trees, not with that clicking, now tapping against the glass some nights, as if it wanted in, but knew it didn't have to ask. I've done search and rescue. I know how to survey terrain, how to document tracks, how to set up trail cams. And even though I hadn't come out here to monitor anything, it felt like the only thing I could still control. So I began recording everything. I didn't have fancy equipment, just an old DSLR, a GoPro, and a backup body camera I'd kept from my ranger days. I rigged what I could, nailed one into the rafters, ran another with motion detection software tied to a cheap solar charger. I even built crude tripwires. Nothing to stop anything, just enough to trigger movement, enough to catch proof, enough to say, "See?" I wasn't imagining this. I spent hours watching the footage back. Dozens of hours. Most nights, nothing. Just static, wind, the cabin creaking as it settled. But then came frame 1927, one frame, less than a blink, not even a full second. Just static, static. And then, tall, in the trees, something. It wasn't a person. The proportions weren't right. Its arms were wrong, too long, legs too narrow. There was no face that I could see, just suggestion. Shape where there should have been definition. As if the thing didn't exist until the camera caught it. And even then, only barely. I played it back again. Paused it. Zoomed. Enhanced. But it always came back to one frame. One flicker. Like whatever it was knew how not to be seen. But it had slipped. Just once. The time code said 3:12 a.m. I checked the calendar. That was the same night I woke up to the smell of damp soil. That same morning I'd found claw marks, vertical, not horizontal, carved into the bark of the pine outside my window, 12 feet high. It wasn't trying to break in. It was letting me know how tall it was. I began labeling the footage. I cataloged noises, created maps of where the sounds clustered. It always came from different angles, different approaches, never the same 2 nights in a row. It was learning my patterns. And worse, it was avoiding the cameras. Every time I changed position, it changed too. I'd set up one rig in the clearing. Next day, the trail of broken twigs moved west. I adjusted to face the ridge. Then I'd find dead birds laid out to the east, in circles, beaks missing. It wasn't trying to hide. It was trying to teach me. Teach me to look deeper, to pay attention, to understand something I was never supposed to know. That's when I started seeing it outside the window, only for a second, only ever still, but always closer than the night before. That thing in the trees wasn't staying out there because it couldn't get in. It stayed out there because I was more useful scared, because the footage wasn't evidence. It was permission. It wanted me to film. It wanted me to document. It wanted me to spread the idea, to make people watch. Maybe because seeing it makes you vulnerable, or maybe because believing in it brings it closer. And that's why I'm still telling you this. Because this story isn't just mine. If it appears in one frame for me, it can appear for you too. Subscribe to MindFuel. Watch everything. Not because you're curious, because now it's curious about you. And it doesn't need to knock anymore. You've already opened the door. The snow had stopped falling by then. Everything was still again. And quiet. Quieter than before. The kind of quiet you only notice once you've heard something you wish you hadn't. That night, I was sorting through the footage again. Nothing new, no movement, no sounds, no glitches, just the cabin, asleep, and then I heard it. Outside, clear, just beyond the window. Sweetheart. My spine locked, because I know that voice. I've known it my entire life. I hadn't heard it in nearly 12 years, not since I stood at the side of a hospital bed and held her hand while the machine stopped. It was my mother's voice. "Baby, are you in there?" It wasn't a recording, not one of mine, not pulled from any memory bank. This wasn't the mimicry from the trees, the fragmented phrases stitched together to sound like me. This was whole, gentle, reassuring, alive. And I froze. I didn't move to the window. I didn't call out. I just sat there, listening, letting my breath tremble in my chest. "Come outside, sweetheart. Just for a second, I want to see you." I can't explain what happened next, because it wasn't a thought. It wasn't a decision. My body stood, legs moving before I gave them permission, feet dragging toward the door, toward that voice, toward the person who couldn't possibly be there, but was. My hand touched the knob, and I swear, I felt warmth on the other side, like sunlight, like safety, like the feeling of her arms when I was 6 and had night terrors. It wasn't just a voice. It was memory made real, and every part of me wanted to open that door. That's what scared me most, because I knew she was dead. I'd seen her buried. I'd put flowers in the ground myself. I'd said goodbye in the rain. And yet, there she was, just inches from me, pleading. "Please, baby, just 1 second. It's cold out here. I don't like being cold." That broke me. That phrase. Because it's what she used to say at bedtime, curling her feet beneath the blankets. It wasn't generic. It was real, a private detail. Whatever was out there, it knew her. It didn't just mimic. It remembered. And if it remembered her, what else had it touched? I turned the lock, stepped back, sat on the floor, shaking. I couldn't even cry. Just waited. Waited for it to try the handle, for the clicking, for the scratch at the wood. But nothing came. The voice didn't call again. And somehow, that was worse. Because it didn't need to. It had already shown me what it could do. It had found the one thing in this world I would always run toward. The one voice that could override fear, logic, death itself. And it used it like bait. I didn't sleep that night, or the one after. I left the lights on. I covered the mirrors. I unplugged everything with a speaker. I stopped watching the footage, because I knew if it could speak like her, the next time, it might sound like me. And if I heard my own voice outside that door, telling me to come look, I don't know if I'd be strong enough to say no again. There's more. Of course there's more. But you're beginning to understand now, aren't you? This isn't about the woods or the cabin. It's about the one thing it needs from you, your attention. So if you're still here, still listening, it means it's found you too. Subscribe to MindFuel. Keep the lights on. Keep watching. Because next time it calls your name, you might answer. There's a point where the unknown stops being a question and becomes a verdict. A moment where you stop asking, "What is this?" and start asking, "What do I do now that it knows I'm real?" For me, that moment came 3 nights after the voice. I hadn't left the cabin in 48 hours. Food was running low. My water supply was fine, but my nerves weren't. I hadn't touched the cameras. I'd stopped watching the footage. Whatever curiosity had pushed me before had evaporated into dread. I kept the blinds shut. Every window covered with old towels, duct tape, blankets, anything to separate me from the glass. I knew it was still out there. I could feel it circling. Sometimes I heard my own voice humming a lullaby I didn't remember singing. Sometimes it was my mother again. Sometimes just breathing, slow, measured, watching, and then it touched the window. I didn't see it happen, but I heard it. A sound that's hard to describe if you've never lived in total silence. It wasn't a knock, not a scratch. It was the sound of skin on glass, warm, wet, pressing. I turned slowly toward the only uncovered window. Just one small pane I'd left untouched above the sink. I don't even know why I left it bare. Maybe I wanted one honest view of the outside, one last defiant line of sight, but that's where it chose. And what I saw will never leave me. 5 fingers, long, boneless in the middle. Each one tapered, like they ended in something sharper than nails. They pressed against the glass like they were studying it, curious, almost tender. But the size, that's what undid me. The hand covered nearly the entire pane, from bottom corner to top. It was wrong, not just oversized, off. There was a kind of bend in the wrist that made no sense. A reverse articulation, like it was built for climbing in ways no human arm could. It didn't move for almost a minute. Then, slowly, deliberately, it dragged one of those fingers downward. And it scratched something, a shape, into the glass itself. Not letters, not a language I knew, just a symbol. One line crossing another, a hook beneath, a crescent to the side. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to understand why it felt familiar. And then it hit me. I'd seen it before. Not out here, not even in my adult life, but as a child, drawn in crayon at the edge of one of my elementary notebooks. A shape I used to draw when I was scared. One my mother asked me about once. I'd forgotten all about it until that moment. It had been with me longer than I understood. And that's when I knew it wasn't human, it wasn't going to leave. And it had learned my name, not just how to say it, but when, where, how it sounded coming from my mother's mouth, how I'd cried it once in my sleep, how it was spelled in childhood drawings and government files and whispered between family members who thought I wasn't listening. It had followed me here because I brought it with me. Or maybe it had always been waiting for me to be alone. I didn't move from that spot for hours. I just sat there, watching that symbol cool in the frost, listening to my name hum through the wood like it was being rehearsed. I stopped filming after that, stopped recording, stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. Because the moment I saw that symbol, I realized I wasn't the first, and I won't be the last. Whatever this thing is, it doesn't haunt places, it haunts people. And now that you've heard my voice, now that you've followed me this far, it knows yours too. Subscribe to MindFuel. Watch the next chapter, because once it marks your window, it doesn't knock again. I woke up before the sun. I hadn't planned to sleep, but sometime in the hours between the last sound and the next breath, I must have drifted off. And I knew, when I opened my eyes and saw the pale light pushing through the seams in the blanket-covered windows, that this was it. I wasn't waiting another night. I didn't pack much, just what I needed to move quickly. Compass, knife, fire starter, 2 energy bars, water canister, no trail map, no GPS, no phone. The signal never came back out here, and I didn't need another screen showing me nothing. I didn't take the path back to the old ranger trail. I couldn't risk it. If it knew where I slept, it knew where I walked. So I aimed the compass due southeast, toward the closest fire road on the edge of state land, and I went straight into the trees. The snow was heavy, but I didn't leave tracks for long. Wind swept through and erased my trail almost as fast as I made it. I hoped that would slow whatever was watching. I hoped that mattered. I didn't look back. I didn't look up, just kept the compass steady in my palm and moved. At first, it was quiet. Then came the whistle. Not far, not a bird, not random. It rose in 2 notes, high to low, software familiar. It was the same tone I'd used years ago to call our old dog home. That's when I realized it wasn't repeating me anymore. It was remembering me. I picked up pace, moved faster through the trees. The branches clawed at my jacket. Thorns caught in my sleeves. I didn't stop. My legs were burning by the second hour. My breath steamed and hung in the air like a beacon. Then came the second whistle. Left side this time, closer, same notes, only louder, and then again, right side, closer still. It was guiding me, trying to steer me somewhere, herd me like cattle, narrow my options, and if I let it, I'd end up where it wanted me, not where I needed to go. So I did something I hadn't done since I first arrived at the cabin. I stopped moving. I crouched beneath a fallen tree, pulled the scarf tight around my face, and held my breath. The forest went still. Even the wind gave way. Just branches shifting in the upper canopy like something tall was weaving through the treetops. No crunch of snow, no footsteps, just weight above. It knew I'd stopped. It knew I was watching. And for the first time since this all began, I think it was enjoying itself. When I finally moved again, it was at a sprint. I didn't care about direction anymore. The compass bounced against my chest. My footing slipped in the drifts. Every time I heard the whistle, I turned in the opposite direction. By the time the sun crested the hills, I could see the faint orange ribbon of the fire road in the distance. Not far, less than half a mile. That's when I heard the last whistle. Not behind, not left or right. Ahead. It had already gotten there. Somehow, some way, it had learned the shortcut, and that was when I understood something I hadn't wanted to believe. It didn't need to follow the rules of the forest, or time, or distance. It was following me. Wherever I went, it could get there first, and if I stopped believing that, even for 1 second, it would make sure I never left again. I pushed harder. I don't remember the last 100 yards. I don't remember falling across the gravel, but I remember the silence that followed. Not peace, not relief, just the silence that comes when the forest decides. You're not worth playing with today. I didn't outrun it. I just gave it a reason to wait. But wait for what? That's what I still don't know. You're still here, still listening. So hear this. Escape doesn't mean survival. Leaving doesn't mean it lets go. Whatever it is, it's not tied to the trees anymore. Subscribe to MindFuel. Come back for the next chapter. I'll tell you what happened when I thought I was safe again, because that's when it started to speak from the walls. I reached town just before dusk. Not mine, not the one I'd grown up in, but the kind of place that only exists at the edges of maps. Fewer than 300 people, 1 diner, 2 gas stations, a single motel with a neon sign that buzzed even when it was off. I didn't talk to anyone. I just paid cash, signed a name that wasn't mine, and took the key to room 6. The room smelled like old coffee grounds and rusted air conditioning, faded floral bedspread, yellow light that flickered when I plugged in my charger. It was the first time I'd been surrounded by man-made walls in over a year, and somehow, it felt smaller than the cabin ever had. I locked the door, then I deadbolted it. Then I dragged the chair across the floor and wedged it beneath the handle. Old habit, but it didn't help me sleep. I lay there for hours, eyes open in the dark, staring at the popcorn ceiling and wondering if I'd made it out, or just made it worse. Around 3:17 a.m., I finally drifted off. No dreams, just static behind my eyes. That kind of sleep where your body gives in before your mind does. I didn't even pull the covers over me, but I woke up, freezing. The window across from the bed was fogged, completely. Thick with condensation, even though the heater was still buzzing weakly in the corner. The room was dry, but the glass was wet. I stood, slowly, moved toward it without really knowing why. Maybe I already knew. Maybe I needed to see it. Maybe some part of me still thought this would end. But when I reached the window, the symbol was there. Same shape, same lines, same hooked crescent, carved through the fog with one long finger, still fresh, still wet. But this time, it was on the inside of the glass. I didn't scream, didn't even flinch. I just stood there, letting the cold from the window soak through my skin, watching as the moisture slowly ran in beads down each groove of that mark. And I knew. I hadn't left it behind. It let me leave. And worse, it had plans for that. I turned every light on in that motel room, piled the dresser against the door, pulled the comforter into the bathtub, and sat there until morning, every few minutes checking to make sure the window hadn't cleared or changed. It never did. The mark stayed, and when sunlight finally cut through the blinds, and I stepped out into the parking lot. I looked back only once. The mark was gone. But I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel free. I felt acknowledged. That's the part they never tell you. That survival doesn't mean escape. It just means your chapter's longer. And whatever this thing is, it doesn't care about geography. It doesn't care about rules. It follows you home. It waits. It watches. And it remembers everything. Everyone. You're still with me. You're still listening. And maybe you've seen things too. Little signs, forgotten drawings, sounds you thought you imagined in a quiet room. If any of this feels familiar, don't ignore it. Subscribe to MindFuel. Because in the next chapter, I find out what happens when it stops whispering and starts answering. I moved into the apartment the following week. Top floor, no elevator, one bedroom, white walls, wood laminate floors, and a view of the parking lot where every night the same streetlight flickered like it was thinking something over. I tried to make things normal again. Groceries, rent, a clock on the wall. I even bought a cactus, low maintenance. No real reason, except I'd read somewhere they absorb bad energy. But every night when I closed the door behind me, I had this feeling. Like I'd left it cracked. Like something came through anyway. Like normal was pretending. My neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Kim, was the first to say something. Kind woman. Keeps to herself. Always brings her garbage out at the exact same time, every Thursday. She stopped me in the stairwell one evening, eyes wide, grocery bag trembling in her hand. Tall man, she said. He was standing outside your door last night, just standing, around 2:30 a.m. I called out to him, but he didn't move. I asked what he looked like. She paused, thought hard, then shook her head like she regretted remembering. Too tall, she whispered. Not right. That was the first night I didn't sleep. Then the dog went missing. Not mine. My neighbor 2 floors down. Big, clumsy German shepherd named Klaus. He used to bark like hell anytime someone walked past their door, didn't matter who it was. One morning, gone. No barking, no sound. Just an open gate, a loose leash, and silence. I checked the cameras in the hallway. The landlord had installed them a year ago after a string of break-ins. I figured it would at least put something on record. Some sign of movement. Anything. But when he showed me the footage from the night Klaus disappeared, it was corrupted. Just static. Like the feed had been wiped clean. Not tampered with, just scrubbed. Except for one frame. One. At 2:41 a.m., the camera catches half a second of motion, blurred, distorted, but unmistakable. 5 elongated fingers reaching around the hallway corner. That same hand. That same stretch of limb I saw against the cabin window. It was here. It wasn't in the woods anymore. It wasn't pretending to be trees, or whistling birds, or distant echoes. It was in my building. I played that frame over and over, tried to show it to a friend. He laughed. Said it was a glitch, compression artifact. Probably a spider leg, he joked. But when I froze the image and traced it out, my blood went cold. That same hooked crescent, not drawn, not carved but implied, in the negative space where the light didn't reach, in the shape the fingers made, it was showing me the mark again, like it wanted me to know. It still remembered, and it was closer now. I stopped using the front door after that. Came in through the fire escape, covered the peephole, pushed furniture against the entryway, bought salt, iron, spoke with an old Navajo man 2 counties over. He didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was crazy. He just said, "It knows you believe." That's enough. Enough for what? I never asked. I was too afraid of the answer. The cactus turned black on day 6, just shriveled and cracked like it had burned from the inside out. I still don't know what that means, but I know this. Whatever came back with me, it doesn't knock, it waits. And when the waiting's done, it takes. You're still listening, still here. Maybe you feel it too. That breath on your neck when the air conditioner's off. That flicker in the corner of your eye you can't explain. That pause between footsteps when someone should have kept walking. If any of this feels too familiar, subscribe to MindFuel, because in the next chapter, it calls me. On the phone, I never reconnected. It didn't stop after the footage, or the dog, or the neighbor's whispers. It got worse, but not louder, smarter. I started seeing it. Not clearly, not like you'd see a person in daylight, but in pieces, in proximity, in suggestion. The first time was at the grocery store, middle of the afternoon. Aisles full of chatter, carts clattering, fluorescent lights buzzing. I was reaching for a box of cereal, just something to chew on while I watched the cameras again that night. And there, between 2 freezer doors, a reflection. But it wasn't mine. It stood behind me, just to the left, taller than anyone should be in that cramped aisle. No face, no movement, just a lean, like it was curious, or remembering. I turned around, nothing. But the glass was warmer where its shape had been. It wasn't a one-time thing. 2 days later, crossing the street downtown, lunch rush, cars honking, people talking into phones, bumping shoulders, ordering sandwiches, living. And across the intersection, rooftop, tall figure, unmoving. One leg bent backward, like its joints didn't remember how to mimic ours. No one else looked up. Not one person, hundreds of eyes, and not one of them lifted. I stared too long, and it tilted its head. That's when I knew. It wanted to be seen, but only by me. It was teaching me something, teaching me how it moves. I tried to talk about it once, to someone who knew me, trusted me. They nodded, smiled, offered me water. 2 days later, they blocked my number. I checked their social media. Happy photos, big smiles, long captions about boundaries and mental health. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't right. Because I'm not seeing things. I'm seeing it. And it knows. It's not hiding anymore, not the way it used to. It doesn't need the shadows, doesn't need the tree line. It has adapted, and it has learned. It learned the language, the buildings, the rhythm of city life. It knows how to walk among us now. It waits at the crosswalk. It hunches inside alleys. It lingers at the edges of bus terminals. And every time I glance across a crowded space, there it is, watching. Just long enough, just real enough, then gone. And no one else reacts. No one else even registers it. You want to know the worst part? I'm not off-grid anymore. I'm not in the wilderness. I'm surrounded by people. It doesn't care. It never did. It followed because it could. Because it was allowed. And now it doesn't need the forest. It learned how to follow, and soon, it'll learn how to stay. You're still here. That means something. Maybe you've started seeing it too. Maybe your reflection lingers half a second too long. Maybe you feel watched even when you're surrounded. That's not a glitch. That's not your mind playing tricks. That's part of the learning. Subscribe to MindFuel, because next, it stops watching and starts knocking. I started dreaming again. I hadn't dreamed for years, not since the woods, not real dreams anyway, just flickers. But now, it's every night, same place, same silence, same trees that lean just a little too far inward, like they're trying to keep something in. And always, I see it. Not in full, never in full. Just glimpses, glints between branches, elongated movement across the black. Sometimes it takes a shape, sometimes it just stares, and when I wake up, my sheets are wet. Not sweat, mud, dark, grainy, cold like the forest floor. Once I woke with pine needles tangled in my toes. My apartment is 4 floors up. No plants, no dirt, no way. So I started talking to someone, therapist, doctor. He listened at first, took notes, asked questions like he was interested, even concerned. I told him everything. The sound, the mark, the figure, the dreams. He nodded a lot, but his eyes started to change. You know when someone's not looking at you anymore, just through you? On the 4th session, he called it a dissociative projection rooted in unresolved isolation trauma. Said it was classic. Said I wasn't dangerous, just confused. I never saw him again. His office was locked the next week. Nameplate gone, website offline, like he'd never practiced, like he was never real, or like something didn't want him listening. I thought maybe I was losing it. I did, until the box came. No return address, no postage, just sitting there on my doorstep one morning. Brown paper, thick red wax seal. Etched into it, that symbol, the same one that was scraped into the window glass back at the cabin, the same one that formed in the hallway shadows on the apartment camera. I didn't open it. I still haven't. It's under my bed, wrapped in 3 garbage bags. Surrounded by a circle of salt I refresh every morning. But sometimes I hear it ticking, not like a clock, not steady, more like breath, like something alive, waiting. And now I wonder, was it ever the cabin that was haunted? Was it ever the place? Or did I invite it by wanting silence so badly I forgot how to be heard? Was it watching me before I left the city? Before the cabin, before I even felt alone? Because the more I think about it, the more I realize it never needed to follow me, and it's never leaving. You're still listening. Still with me. That means you've felt it too, haven't you? The shift in a room when you're alone, the whisper in a dream that shouldn't know your name, the gift you never asked for, delivered right to your door. Subscribe to MindFuel, because next, the phone rings. And the voice on the other end? It's mine. I couldn't take it anymore. The dreams, the marks, the ticking box, the flickers of it in the dark, the waiting. I told myself it began with that cabin, so I decided to end it there too. Gasoline, matches, salt, old map in my glove box, still creased down the middle like it hadn't moved since I fled. I didn't pack food or clothes or a reason. I just drove. 97 miles of blacktop, last 3 on foot, same trail, same turns. The forest had changed, or maybe I had. Everything looked tighter, denser, the sky smaller. I should have reached the clearing by mid-afternoon. I didn't. The sun began to set, and then I stepped into what should have been my home. But it wasn't there. No cabin, no stone path, no porch, no broken shutters, no scars on the trees where I'd carved distances into bark. Just a clearing, flat, quiet, undisturbed, like the forest had grown over it, like it had never been touched, except the grass in the center wasn't right. It was shorter, flattened, tended, and I felt it before I saw it. That weight, that impossible anchoring pressure in the back of the skull, the one that says you're not meant to look behind you. But I did, and there it was, standing where the cabin should have been, not hiding, not flickering in the frame of a camera, not imitating anyone's voice, just waiting. Its arms were too long, its neck bent in 3 places, no face, no eyes. But I knew it saw me. I didn't move. Neither did it. I thought about lighting the match anyway, right there, Even if the cabin was gone, maybe the ground remembered, maybe fire could make it forget. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, because as I looked at it, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until that moment. It didn't follow me back to town. I followed it. And it let me go. Not because it was done, but because it needed to become something else. Something that doesn't live in one place. Something that returns. The match fell from my hand, didn't even spark. I turned, walked back the way I came, didn't run, because that's what it wants. It likes it better when you run. The clearing didn't close behind me. It stayed open, still is, waiting for someone else who wants to leave the world behind, for silence, for peace, for space to breathe. It's there, always has been. And if you go far enough, deep enough, quiet enough, you'll find it, or it'll find you. Subscribe to MindFuel, because there's one chapter left, and you need to know how this ends, even if I don't. I thought I was done, that walking away from that clearing meant the story could end quietly, that maybe, just maybe, I'd be allowed to forget. But I woke up to the sound of my flashlight clicking on. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't moved. The room was dark except for the light sputtering in the corner, pointing at the wall, shaking like someone was holding it, but I wasn't. And behind the light, a shadow that didn't move when I did. I grabbed the camera, pressed record. Something in me needed this to exist somewhere outside my head. The whispers started again, low at first, almost like static. Then they grew. Voices, not just mine anymore. Dozens, hundreds, all speaking at once, not shouting, whispering, chanting, breathing all around me. The light flickered faster, on, off, like it was blinking, like it was trying to warn me. And then I heard it. A voice I'd never heard before. It didn't come from a direction. It came from inside. It said, "You invited me." The sound wasn't loud, but it echoed. It landed in my bones, in my teeth, like biting on tinfoil. You invited me when you left the grid. I just followed your signal. I didn't understand. But it kept going. You called for quiet, I answered. You begged to be alone. I listened. And now you want the noise back? That's when the lights went out completely. Total darkness, no flashlight, no camera glow, just black, like the inside of the earth. And the sound was breathing, right beside me, right next to my ear. It whispered one last thing, my name. It's here, it's in the house, it's in the walls. It was never outside. It never had to break in. I let it in. I let it in. I let it in. If you're hearing this, don't turn off the lights. Don't go quiet. Don't wish to be alone. Subscribe to MindFuel, because this story doesn't end with me. It's just where it started. This is the last footage I have from the apartment. Timestamp, 3:17 a.m. The hallway outside my door is still. Light flickers once, twice, then steadies. I'm seen walking across the frame, barefoot. I don't look at the camera. I'm holding something, can't tell what. Head low, shoulders, wrong, bent. I reach the end of the hallway, stop, turn to the wall, and then I vanish. No edit, no door opens. One frame, I'm there. Next, I'm gone. And what's left is the symbol, burned into the drywall, not painted, not carved, burned, perfect, centered, like it always knew where it would end. The footage continues for 42 more seconds. Nothing moves, not a shadow, not a flicker. Then the lens fogs, only once, and fades to black. That apartment's still listed. They never found me, or whatever else was recorded that night. They say it's a camera glitch, that it was tampered with. But they won't tell you what the fire inspector found behind the wall, or why they sealed the room. But if you search long enough, you'll find the last still. It's been uploaded and pulled down a dozen times. One frame, grainy, low light, but you can still see the mark. And something else. Behind it. Tall, out of focus, almost out of frame. It's never really gone, not when you know about it, not when you've watched, not when the signal's already been sent. Subscribe to MindFuel. Because stories like this aren't fiction anymore, they're warnings, and you've just been marked. Welcome to the silence. I wanted to vanish, and something let me. I thought disappearing would save me from the noise, from the world, from myself. But silence doesn't save you. It reveals you. It clears the signal. And now I know. If you hear someone whistling at night, don't answer. That means it knows where you live now. Subscribe to MindFuel. Because the next story might start with your silence.